of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, March 25th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ingrid Robeyns, humanities professor at Utrech University in the Netherlands, author of Limitarianism, the case against extreme wealth. Also on the program today, moments ago, UN Security Council votes to demand a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. U.S. abstains. Government shutdown averted Friday night. That is until September. Blew that. ISIS-K claims responsibility for a terror attack, killing 137 in Moscow. Speaker Johnson may have to rely on Democrats and Ukraine funding to keep his speakership. Rhino. Millions of families with low income will lose government internet subsidies as the Affordable Connectivity Program expires. Meanwhile, this just breaking, a New York State appeals court says Donald Trump can pay a reduced bond of $175 million if he wants an appeal. Otherwise, he owes closer to $500 million in 10 days. Also, highlighting Donald Trump's day, he's in court for a criminal hush money trial. Mifepristone case will head to the Supreme Court tomorrow. Tammy Murphy drops out of the New Jersey Senate race, all but ensuring Senator Andy Kim in the fall. And MSNBC says it has no plans to have new NBC hire Ronna McDaniel Romney on air. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on this Monday, or as Emma Vigeland calls it,
Monday Fun Day or Fun Day Monday. Either one.
You really seem to be getting into that.
I just didn't know enthusiasm was required.
It's not.
Monday Fun Day.
It's not. I was just making an observation.
It's usually indicative of how I'm feeling for the day. I feel a little slow today. Feel a little bit slow. So
okay,
that's how you can tell.
All right. I just wanted to note that both Emma and I had angry outbursts, irrational anger in prep today.
What was yours?
Oh, I missed that.
Mine was.
Yes, you missed
mine
that.
was over the internet connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
I just lost it.
Yeah, mine was over
In the office?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that a computer problem or internet?
No. The bill it provides for 22 million people. It gives them subsidies around $30 a month to pay for a high-speed internet.
This is policy.
And the Republicans have more or less been able to kill it. It was in the IRA, which was an add-on from during COVID. It was in the IRA. It runs out in April or in May, somewhere between April and May. And there are Republicans who say, well, some people who are getting it don't need it. And
are we sure we couldn't get a profit seeker more?
And I was just like, why are we even talking about this? The internet providers have monopolies in every one of these municipalities where it's in. Maybe in some instances there's two.
Right.
And once they're connected, literally connected, there's no cost associated, significant costs associated to these internet providers. They're just basically have a license to print money. And I say, let's just nationalize the whole thing and be done with this.
That would be nice. But remember the Obama phone scandal of the aughts? What was that, 2011, 2012? The Republicans had a meltdown with the idea that cell phones could be provided for people.
Yeah, except for that program started with George W. Bush.
I know. Yeah. Well,
I just lost it. I don't know why that of all the things, maybe it's just like misdirected anger. But we do have like some measure of good news today. The UN Security Council, and really it was the so-called E10, that is the elected members, is that what it is? The non-permanent Security Council members presented a resolution, which was also, is my understanding, backed by, the 10 were Algeria, Guyana, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, and Switzerland. And this resolution was also backed by the UK and France, I believe, as well, in addition, obviously, to China and Russia. And it basically, the U.S. Was just simply not in a position to veto this one. Yeah. And so they abstained. But the key paragraph here, just scroll down. The UN Security Council, and I'm quoting now, demands an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, respected by all parties, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire. Now, the U.S. is responsible for that word sustainable as opposed to permanent.
And lasting was, I think, the change. Yeah. The lasting sustainable, right? It was supposed to be permanent.
Oh, permanent sustainable ceasefire. And they changed it to lasting sustainable.
Exactly.
Nevertheless, I mean, this, it just shows you sort of like the importance of each word in these documents. Nevertheless, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire, and also demands the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, as well as ensuring humanitarian access to address their medical and humanitarian needs. Now, this is an important construction because the U.S. wanted the demand for the immediate and unconditional release of hostages conditioned as a condition for a lasting, sustainable ceasefire, which of course has been supposedly the Israeli position. But the UN Security Council did not do that. They simply put these two demands into the same sentence, but they are not conditioned upon each other. So there is no sort of like, well, they haven't released hostages, so we don't have to have a ceasefire. And there's no ceasefire, so we don't have to release hostages. These are two separate demands that are not conditioned upon each other. What's the legal force of this? I mean, there is no necessary, I mean, there is legal force in the sense that international law has legal force. The problem is there's no international cop to come down. However, this is going to be used as the predicate for what we're about to see, I would predict in the next 2 or 3 weeks, an increasing embargo of Israel.
Yeah.
Now, the U.S. is not legally bound to not provide weapons, but this is going to create more pressure domestically from lawmakers. Because look, the U.S. did not veto this. They abstained. They were forced. I mean, this is the way that international politics works. Just to finish this, as well as ensuring humanitarian access to address their medical and other humanitarian needs, and further demands that the parties comply with their obligations under international law in relation to all persons they detain. So, and then they go on to emphasize the urgent need to expand the flow of humanitarian assistance and reinforce the protection of civilians in the Gaza Strip, reiterates its demand for the lifting of all barriers to the provision of humanitarian assistance at scale in line with so there's another demand there, and that demand is exclusively focused at Israel, which has been creating barriers
for food
to the provision of humanitarian services. And so
which is, I think, by the way, enough. I read this legal opinion, basically, that was written in the European Journal of International Law, where they posture that intent for genocide could be determined based on the withholding of aid, of food coming into the Gaza Strip alone, which, I mean, I think we are well past that. But from a legal perspective, and from what we saw with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the House floor, calling it a genocide, using her sizable influence within, you know, the progressive members of the Democratic Party, and there are a lot of Democrats that really like her and listen to her, saying specifically that the famine that's created by Israel is sufficient to determine intent of genocide, basically going ahead of like what the ICJ will eventually determine, was notable. It's the famine and what they're hearing from Chris Van Hollen and these other Democrats who are going to the crossings and seeing Israel is turning away trucks. They're slowing the delivery of aid, of food, and turning trucks away because there's like children's scissors in them and things like that. Look, like, no, but the point is they have firsthand knowledge from other Democrats, which is changing things.
The U.S. has also like tacitly admitted it.
I know.
If you need to airdrop and you need to build a port when there are roads that lead into the country, it begs the question, what's going on with those roads?
But from AOC's perspective, right, from a U.S. domestic politics perspective, making that case that a deliberate famine of a population where you control the borders to wherever they are, basically an open-air prison, concentration camp, whatever you want to call it, that is sufficient to determine genocidal intent. That's something that is beginning, I think, to set in way too late, way too many lives lost. We told you this was a genocide in November, okay? But that's from a domestic politics perspective, I think, what is making the pressure ramp up. How obvious it is that they're starving these people to death.
Another thing is, like, it's nice to move forward on the ceasefire stuff. Labor for Palestine calling on all U.S. unions who, you know, of course, the calls for a ceasefire from unions have been great, but the relationship of weapons needs to end. It needs to absolutely end, and that's the call that Labor for Palestine is saying now. So,
all right, we will later in the program play a clip of AOC on the House floor. That is, I think, you know, along with what we heard from Van Hollen earlier in the week, we're beginning, and frankly, what we saw from Schumer as a litmus test more than anything else as to what was going on in the Senate. Chuck Schumer, I assure you, is not taking the lead on this. Chuck Schumer is, I think, consistent with, my longtime assessment of him as a concierge. When he gets up there and says there's a problem with Bibi Netanyahu, he is, one, trying to placate a real, I think, movement within the Democratic caucus in the Senate that he is attempting to get out in front of, both to service them and to get out in front of them by letting a little air out of the tires. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the U.S. Congress. It remains to be seen if they're going to be able to stop. There was $3.8 billion, in my understanding, in the budget that was just passed the other day to go to Israel in terms of aid.
Yep.
But to stop the next tranche of $11 billion, at the very least, would send a strong message to Israel, which may or may not implicate their domestic politics and sort of like force an end to this assault. But we shall see. We're going to take in a moment, we're going to be talking to Ingrid Robeyns. She is a humanities professor at Utrech University in the Netherlands, author of Limitarianism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. In just a moment, we got a couple of ads sponsoring the program today. Oh, okay. Yes. We are moving into spring. You wouldn't know it from today. It was like
Very
29
cold.
degrees walking in today. It was freezing. But it's going to be 50, and we're a couple of days away. It seems to me 60s, then 70s, and then I stop sleeping at night.
Oh,
Or I used to. But now that's not the case. Why? Because Cozy Earth bedding, their sheets are temperature regulating. I sleep very hot. And it's like Saul will sleep with the window open right now with no sheets or blankets on him.
oh my gosh.
I'm not
You got
like
to
that
the window
anymore.
open, but with blankets.
Right.
Yes.
I'm not like that anymore. But in the summer, it's too hot for me. But Cozy Earth bedding, I don't know what it is. It breathes. And it's because it is made from something called viscose, which is bamboo. And I want to thank Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode and tell you they are offering 35% off at CozyEarth.com with the coupon code Majority Report at checkout. Their bedding, like I said, the luxury bedding is made with viscose. It is from bamboo. It is highly sustainable because bamboo grows literally like a weed. And it's like, I got to say, like surprisingly, the softest sheets I've ever slept on. The temperature regulation, I feel it, or I feel the absence really more than anything else.
Right.
I don't wake up like in a sweat. Frankly, I don't want to be
No, I understand.
gross about it, but and Cozy Earth was founded to transform lives by, again, offering the softest, most luxurious, and responsibly sourced bedding in the world. Cozy Earth bedding is ethically sourced using premium viscose from highly sustainable bamboo. If you've ever tried to grow bamboo, you've realized a year or two later you've made a big mistake because it just keeps growing. It doesn't stop. Cozy Earth bedding is naturally temperature regulating. It's breathable. You'll sleep more comfortably all year round. Cozy Earth bedding comes with a 100-night sleep trial, which means you have up to 100 nights to sleep on them. You can wash them, obviously. I hope you do. And try them out. And if you're not completely, Matt, if you're not completely in love, just return them within 100 days for a full refund. All their products include a 10-year warranty against defects. I mean, come on. Do you know what I mean by the way?
I do defects now too?
No, I'm saying just like, I could see you go too long without washing your sheets.
Wow.
I got slanderous.
Wow.
What to add?
Whoa.
Doesn't matter if it's their luxury bedding, their ultra comfortable loungewear, plush bath towels. I incidentally have the bath towels. You can get cozier with Cozy Earth. If you've never tried Cozy Earth, I got some awesome news. You can save up to 35% off Cozy Earth right now. But hurry, this offer won't last. Go to CozyEarth.com, enter my promo code Majority Report at checkout, and you'll get 35% off your first order. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code Majority Report, CozyEarth.com. And also sponsoring the program today, Americans throw away 25% more trash from Thanksgiving to New Year's. This year, let your New Year's resolution be less garbage and less plastic. Blue Land's on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet. Same powerful clean you're used to. This stuff is pretty awesome. I am now using, they have dishwasher tablets. Comes in a little tin. Tin is cute, I guess. I don't pay attention to that as much, but the tablets are awesome. They clean very well. They don't have plastic on the outside of them, so you're not getting microplastics in with your dishware. None of that. They do a great job of cleaning. I also have 3 bottles now. They are different colors, which is also genius, and you never realize this until you need them. You know, one's blue, one's yellow, one's pinkish reddish. You drop a tablet in there, and it gets you a window cleaner, all-around cleaner, and I think a bathroom cleaner. Refill start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription, or you buy in bulk for additional savings. And when you buy in bulk this stuff, it's just little bags. It's just super easy. Paper bags for the, what do you call it? The dishwashing thing. So you're not walking around with heavy jugs of plastic. And once you buy the set, it's just refills, $2.25. They have hand soap, they have toilet bowl cleaner, they have laundry tablets. All Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients you can feel good about. Blue Land is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Blue Land has a special offer for listeners right now. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. You don't want to miss this. blueland.com/majority, 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority. Get 15% off. Check it out. We will put the links in the description of the podcast in YouTube and at majority.fm. Quick break, and we'll be right back with Ingrid Robeyns, humanities professor at Utrech University, author of Limitarianism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Ingrid Robeyns. She is a humanities professor at Utrech University in the Netherlands, author of Limitarianism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Let's start, well, I guess with just sort of the broad strokes. And I don't think this is going to be, these ideas are going to be terribly foreign to our audience, but that they are a ism, I think is interesting to people. But limitarianism, what is that?
So it's the idea, the reason why it's an ism is because I'm a political philosopher, so I work in a field where people talk about things like egalitarianism and other more technical words. And that's why I came up with this word limitarianism. But it basically means just like you have a poverty line where nobody should fall below, there should also be a maximum, a limit where nobody should be above in terms of personal wealth. That is the conclusion I come to when looking at what wealth does and wealth inequality to our societies.
Okay, let's go through that. Let's just start with some statistics as to where we are in terms of this sort of like incredible disparity, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. But this has been something that's been growing, at least in this country, precipitously now for 50 years or so.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't know within the context of Europe as much. Maybe you can let us know.
Yes, so I actually digged up the statistics from the 2023 Global Wealth Report, which is online, openly available, so anybody can check it. And this is about the distribution of wealth in the US, personal wealth. And the bottom half of the Americans has 3% of all wealth, and the top 1% has 31% of all wealth. And that distribution, I mean, in the US, it is a bit worse than in Europe, but the distribution that the top half has like between 2, 3, 4, 5%, and the top 1% has 30%, and the top 10 tends to have between 60 and 70. That is in all rich countries.
So let's go through, I mean, before we get to sort of like what's a number that we would limit this to and why, let's talk about, you take us through the various sort of like problems that this type of disparity in particular creates. Because I mean, this is it's all about relativity too, right? I mean, if we were to devalue the dollar and all the numbers, all of a sudden we had, everybody was a millionaire, you'd still have this problem because you'd have some trillionaires or something. And
it's true. Yeah. So it's true that it's about inequality and then really inequality about the top, but it's also about a concentration of so much wealth in the 10% and then especially in the 1% that what economists call the opportunity cost of that money, that means the kind of pain it does to people for spending that money is nothing. Like if you have millions and millions, even billions, you can easily give a few millions to a political campaign because really it doesn't make a difference. Whereas if, of course, a country has also a lot of economic inequality, but the country is in general poor, then those who are in the best positions really need that money for material, to improve their material quality of life. And the particular case of the US is that inequality is perhaps not the largest, because if you look at the distribution, Russia actually is the worst case, and on some metrics, South Africa is also very bad. But the US is such a rich country. The average wealth and the median wealth is so high that the disparity that is great in all these countries makes it even more pronounced. And so you asked me about the reasons to be worried about this kind of wealth concentration. Basically, it's of three types. One is it harms society in two ways. One is that it undermines democracy, and the second way is that it's incompatible with ecological sustainability. These are the harms. The second is that it is what we philosophers call morally undeserved. So nobody can really say that due to their own efforts or something that they can really relate to themselves, they can deserve so much wealth. And the third is that even the super...
Oh, we've lost you.
Very briefly. Okay. Let's hope.
Bear with us, folks. She needs to reconnect, and we'll do that right now. Should we go to a quick break? We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back. We're back. Apologies, we had a little internet problem. So, Professor, you were walking us through the concept of that it's not just a question of inequality. It is the extreme concentration of wealth that allows essentially billionaires, 100 millionaires, of having too much of an influence on our democracy and undermining it, B, creating problems environmentally for us because of the nature of their lifestyles. And then you started to talk about how it was morally undeserved in the context of a political philosophy notion. But let's take the first two first. The question of undermining democracy. Walk us through that, if you will.
Yes, sure. So first, I'm hoping we won't have another glitch with the internet. So technology is not perfect. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Democracy. So you have the sphere of money and you have the sphere of democracy. Ideally, you build walls between those two spheres, for example, by having campaign legislation or by having other legal rules that prevent people from using their money to buy so if you have a position of power in the sphere of money, to buy.
What's going on? Okay, we got to do a call and we're going to take... We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland. Apologies, we've had some internet issues, but we have on the line Ingrid Robeyns, the author of Limitarianism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. And so, Professor, you were outlining for us the problems with democracy associated with such a concentration of extreme wealth. You had mentioned at that point, like the obviously the influence that individual players can have within the context of particularly our electoral system, which is so contingent upon money.
Yes.
But continue on.
Yeah, so I think ideally we would have walls between the sphere of money and the sphere of politics, such that one can't turn a position of power in the sphere of money or position of privilege, hence being super rich, into a position of power in the sphere of democracy, because that undermines, in the sphere of politics, because that undermines the principle of political equality. However, these walls, even when they are strong, like they are in European Union, because we have very, very strict campaign legislation, they are not perfect. And that is because there's campaign legislation that you can regulate, but there's also lobbyists. And lobbyists, the more money you have, the more people you can hire to lobby for you. And for example, in the US, there's a fantastic book written by the American Patriotic Millionaires, which is an activist millionaire group. It's called Tax the Rich, and they have outlined how with lobbying, the super rich have basically decreased the taxes that they pay. So it's logical that if you have money, you can hire lobbyists, you can basically influence politics much more. So this is why I think there is a danger of wealth concentration for our democracies.
I'd like also to add, and I wonder if you have a perspective on this. You know, one of the examples I use, aside obviously from Elon Musk, being able to purchase Twitter, which was presumably the town square, and have a market influence on that town square. But the one example I use is the Gates Foundation. In their essentially completely upending our educational system in this country for about 2 decades because of their ability to dump $1 billion and then have billions of dollars chase it in our education system for an experiment that, again, like I think dramatically set education off on a wrong course, and then only to have the Rand Corporation that they hired to make an assessment to tell them that was a failed experiment. Meanwhile, we lost a generation of teachers to this whole sort of like a corporate education reform movement. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, and if there is an equivalent in Europe to that type of dynamic, because and we'll get to this in terms of like the types of action. Europe already has a baseline, many countries, some more than others, already has a baseline of social services which free up people in a way that this country does not.
Yes. Yeah, so I should say that my book has both data on Europe and also on the US, and the arguments that I'm making against wealth concentration hold much more in the US. So you see that if I may say so, the harmful influence of money on politics, on the environment, are much worse in the US because wealth concentration is much stronger, but also because the root of all this is what you could call the dominant economic policies of the last 5 decades. We call that neoliberalism, and that has been much stronger in the US than in continental Europe. We still have a bit more of a mixed economy. There's still more government involvement, and that means that certain goods are still provided at decent or high quality by the government, including basic education, including some form of healthcare that depends a bit or that differs a bit between countries. And that means we have kept that out of the market. And in a mixed economy, you would give some goods that make up our quality of life to the markets, to market players. You should give some to the government to take care of, and some should be common. So people that collectively decide to take care of a certain provision, as we now, for example, see in energy cooperatives. And what I think is a big difference between the US and continental Europe is the degree to which we allow the government to take on some of those roles. If I talk to Europeans, I say it's been going backward for us. We should reclaim the role for the government. But if you compare Europe with the US, it's clear that inequalities are less pronounced and also have less of an effect on the worst off in Europe because of the social security system and the welfare state that is still, even though it's been worsening, it's still stronger than in the US.
Let's speak about how this type of wealth concentration immiserates the poor in this country.
Yes, so actually there is a book being written by the Princeton sociologist Matthew Desmond that who details who describes in quite detail how government policies are actually often pro-rich rather than pro-poor. And he makes a very important point, which is that when it comes to any policies that involve money, including, of course, tax policies, it is a zero-sum game. That means if you cut taxes for the rich, which you can do either because the tax rates go down or because you have different rules for income from labor and income from capital, because the rich people tend to have capital and income from capital, then you favor the rich, which means you're missing out on tax revenue that you could use to invest in education, health, housing, communities for everybody, but especially for the poor. And that is a story that goes a bit against the kind of myth that we have in our current form of capitalism, which is that everybody would become better off from capitalism. I'm not against a form of capitalism, but I think the current form we have is really it's not giving a real, genuine opportunity to, the majority of people, really.
Right. So, I guess that's my question here as well. The notion that is capitalism in general always going to create any unequal outcomes democratically, meaning that when there are people who have higher concentration of wealth or who have more wealth, even when we're severely limiting that kind of system, doesn't that just inherently give the wealthier better opportunities to influence democracy, even if we're beginning to shrink that sphere of influence?
Yes, so I think some of these inequalities will be inevitable if you have some form of free market system. I think that's a price worth paying, but right now they're just too big. And the support for people who do not have that power in society has weakened. And there is another issue which we haven't touched upon yet, which is that because the inheritance tax has either been abolished or is effectively very close to zero in many countries, we're basically letting some people be born purely due to the luck of who their parents happen to be, with millions. They receive millions just because they happen to be the kids of some very rich parents, and others have nothing. And that creates a really big inequality of opportunity. And also, the people who argue for capitalism and the ideal of the American dream and so forth, they all say, yes, you should have equal opportunities, but we right now do not have equal opportunities. So I think even people who are, say, pro-markets and pro-meritocracy, they should favor much higher taxation on inheritance. Actually, some scholars just say we should abolish inheritance, because why should you receive something purely because you happen to have been lucky of where and with whom you were born? So if you were to, for example, if you were to have a full abolishment of inheritance and all that money would be redistributed fairly among all young people, So you don't even need a state. You can distrust the state and keep it out of this redistribution. Then all young people would get a kickstart, a citizen's income or whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of their adult life, and there would be much more equal opportunity and hence much fairer chances than we currently have.
How much? I would just going back to that, keeping the poor living in poverty, as you write. How much of that is, and obviously the dynamics between, let's say, a country, the Netherlands or even Belgium and the United States is very different because we have control over our currency, and the implications of our currency internationally is a little bit different because we've shown zero hesitancy to run at a deficit and create debt when it comes to cutting taxes for wealthy or the corporations. Far more reluctant to incur that debt or deficit when it comes to subsidizing good internet connection or for that matter, or providing support for parents with children or daycare. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
How much of that dynamic of the failure to collect taxes on wealthy people is inhibiting services for the poor? How much of that dynamic is actually sort of a canard, if you will? Like, we could provide these services for the poor in this country, but the wealthy, by hoarding the money that they're hoarding, create the narrative that there is no money available for these things, more than actually really create the lack of money for these things.
No, totally. I mean, the irony is that the U.S. has more money than almost any other country. We have a few very small countries like Switzerland, also because it really attracts a lot of. It's a taxpayer's paradise. But if you talk about large countries, the U.S. is on average incredibly rich. It's a very rich country. So you could really, as a country, have all those basic investments in education and health and all those other things. But I think the problem really in the U.S. is that politics, the democratic system, has been really captured by big money. I mean, American political scientists no longer talk about democracy. They say of the U.S. that it's an oligarchy. Some say plutocracy. And so that basically means that the democratic system is in the hands of those with lots of money. Now, we've seen that there are a couple of exceptions to that. You have had some members of Congress elected that did it without taking money from Wall Street. But that is, for me, the question. It's almost like a catch-22. You can't fix the socioeconomic system because what you need is the democratic system, but the democratic system is basically being kept hostage by some players in the socioeconomic system. And the only solution I see is to make people back, to activate them as citizens, so to inform them, to have them engage with the facts. Of course, therefore you also, of course, need neutral media. You need media that report on facts and not on propaganda. So it is a very difficult situation to be in.
We also have the problem where we have a media that is very much tied to wealthy interests, and so it's going to be very tough to count on them to present this story on a regular basis, it seems to me. Let's talk about before we get into sort of like the three types of action that we need to change this. You write, you have a chapter entitled "Nobody Deserves to Be a Multimillionaire." This is where we start getting into sort of like the ethical and moral implications of this, where, to be honest with you, I am less comfortable on some level, because I don't really care one way or another about the moral or ethical implications of this generally. It's just incredibly dysfunctional in my estimation, and not the way we should go. But it is something that is deployed when you raise this to people in this country, the idea of a confiscatory tax, that it's like, how could you on moral grounds? There's no sort of practical argument that they have there is a practical argument. We can address that in a moment, entrepreneurship and whatnot, and progress. But what is it about the question of deserve?
Yeah, so this is I accept this is really an argument for moral philosophy. But the argument is, in moral philosophy, you have theories of desert, and in the idea of meritocracy, the basic moral core is that people deserve a certain amount of wealth or certain material outcomes because of something that has to do with their own personal actions or effort, and here we tend to think that those who are very successful economically, that they have done something that makes them deserving of that economic success. But there is an idea of human nature underlying this type of reasoning, which emphasizes individual properties, our talents and our effort, and I think it downplays the very large role of luck in our lives. And here I draw on research from various disciplines, but basically there's the natural lottery, the social lottery, and there's also something called market luck. The natural lottery is where you are born with with the kind of genetic makeup you have, the talents you have, but also, for example, whether you're prone to illnesses. Also something like the energy levels that you may have into your body constitutively. Those are just merely things if you happen to be a strong person, you are very lucky. And then I think the right attitude is counting your blessings rather than saying, look, this is me, I deserve everything I can do with this body and these talents that I've received. The social lottery is the parents you got, and here, or the environment. For example, if you're born in the US, you're much more lucky than if you're born in, let's say, Somalia or Afghanistan. There's no we don't need to explain this. So that means that if you are born in a country that offers lots of opportunity, again, the right attitude is to say, well, I've been lucky that I was born here, rather than to believe that whatever people who do not receive any opportunities can make of their lives is their responsibility. So the bottom line is that I think the view of human nature that we should embrace is one that acknowledges the huge influence of luck on our lives. And if we were to take that view of human nature, rather than the one that focuses on individual responsibility and individual merit that is dominant in the neoliberal view of human nature, we would look at the deservingness of our economic success in a different way. That is, I know this is a metaphysically kind of destabilizing or kind of perhaps I would say non-mainstream view that I'm advocating there, but I believe it to be true based on what I know from what I've read in the sciences.
This is, I should say, it's pretty mainstream here, at least on this program, that perspective. But I wonder, too, how much does the vestige of religion work at play here? Because it seems to me that, like, the way that you ignore luck in this instance, which of course is like, again, like you say, function of, in this country, what area code were you born in, who are your parents? Mm-hmm. All of this seems to me to be like, if you ignore the fact that you got lucky, it has to be some semblance of like, I received these skills or whatnot because I was in some respects chosen, or, and I wonder how much of that is a vestige of a sort of a religious rubric, if you will, and why that would be so prominent in the U.S. Versus, let's say, European countries?
So I should say this is not my area of expertise. I don't have any expertise on the effect of religion on wealth distribution. But so I'm just going to say some general things that I believe to be true. But you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. So I think it has to do probably with Protestantism, and that in Europe. I guess the type of Protestantism that the way it's been developed might be a bit different than in the U.S. And of course, we also still have half of Europe is Catholic, or we still have other influences too. Of course, you have different types of minority religions, and to the east you have more Orthodox churches. And I think, of course, if you believe that you were chosen by God and that your talents have been given to you, and you have a whole story around this, then there's little I can say to a person who believes that they deserve it in that sense. So it is, I should just say, I think it's just the case that my book is written from a secular perspective, because, and perhaps this is different in Europe than in the US, but I just think we can't think about how we should organize society from a religious perspective, because there are plenty of people who are not religious, and there are also, among those who are religious, there are very different points of view. So, that's the best I can make of it, I fear.
Well, I mean, I look back, and we look back at like sort of the era of monarchs and rulers up until really the advent of democracy, and it was all justified by divine right. And if you were in that position and you had the opportunity to have the biggest army, or your dad was king, and so now you're king, it all is okay and morally justified because that's the way God wanted it.
Yeah. But, I think people who have excessive power will always come up with,
right,
you could say, constructed reasons to justify why they believe they should have that money. So it is, and that's, of course, they would say, I mean, suppose they're now trying to justify why they have all those billions. Well, they would probably say, they would start to talk about their own input, their own efforts, their own genius. There are also plenty of super rich people who believe that they are of a different type of special type of human beings who are geniuses, whereas if you were really to kind of look into detail on how they became so rich, there's also really this enormous effect of luck. Actually, one of the three types of luck I didn't explain, but market luck is also a form of luck. Robert Frank has written this fantastic little book called Success and Luck. He's an economist, and he explains how even among those who are equally talented and equally able and willing to put in an effort, luck still plays a major role in who will get, say, the dominance of a product in the market, or who will be picked as a CEO. And I think it's eye-opening to see from studies the importance of luck in our lives. Yeah. But of course, if you take a religious view and then just say, luck is what God has given me, then I think I can no longer argue with such a person.
Well, to your point, I think there's two separate points, right? Where there is, why is there less class consciousness maybe in the United States than there is in other countries? And I would say there's a lot of prosperity gospel kind of ideology, if to Sam's point, where wealth equals moral standing, but that's kind of like just working backwards maybe from the inequality. But to your point, like there's that famous study that was done by UC Irvine of monopoly players, where there is an understanding when they're playing the game Monopoly that they're giving an unfair advantage to one cohort and they end up winning, but they interview them afterwards and they begin to say, well, this is what I did to deserve it. I actually did win fairly. Yeah. And that is, I think, the kind of motif I return to when
Yeah.
looking at the psychology of what you're saying.
Yes, yes, you're totally right. Yes, so that is really what people do. We always try to justify the privileges. It's in the end, it's economic privileges that we've had, and then so that we don't have to question whether we should actually keep them.
Yeah.
Let's. I want to talk about the three types of action that you suggest is needed here to deal with this. The first being structural action, the second being fiscal action, and the third being a ethical or cultural change. In terms of structural action, that I guess is basically what we were talking about earlier. To set the table for this, you need to have a stronger welfare state, for lack of a better word, or social insurance program that runs across and decommodifies a lot of the sort of the necessities that we have in the context of modern life.
Yes, that's one important aspect, but it's really, I think the structural changes have really to do with the type of economy that we have. So, and of course, the welfare state, I see the welfare state or insurance, social insurance as part of the economy, because in the end, the economy is a system we have to provide for our material quality of life. At least that's how I, in a sort of a systems neutral way, would describe this. One important thing that empirical scholars have noted is that the share of the economic production that goes to those who are working, hence to the production factor labor, has gone down in comparison with the share that has gone to those who put in capital. And that means that the old categories from political economy, capital and labor, really need to be back on the table. And it is in the end about a division of power, because if capital is stronger, more powerful than labor, then they can dictate the rules of the game. And the problem, which Adam Smith already in the Wealth of Nations pointed out, is that often people who work and who only have their labor to gain an income that they need to feed their families, they must take whatever offer they can get, because those who actually are at the capital side, they have time, they can wait. And to make this story shorter, what you really need is a power balance, and you need a power balance because you need to have a power balance. You need labor unions. And that I see is really a big difference between the US and Europe, that we have legal protection for labor unions. And this is, if you see at what, for example, Bezos and Musk do, it's a problem.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen union density drop dramatically over those 4 or 5 decades in which sort of we entered the neoliberal era, without a doubt. And in some respects, it precipitated it as well. So it's both, and I would imagine both like an increase in the governmental support and structure to make unionization more, and make it easier, but also, bringing people to a contract quicker once those unions get established. But I would also imagine that if I did not have to worry about health care, and if I did not have to worry about daycare, and I didn't have to worry about housing, that is going to significantly change the power balance between me and a capitalist manager, because
absolutely,
I could lose my job, but I know that I'm going to be able to provide healthcare for my kid.
Absolutely.
I can lose my job, but I'm not going to lose my home, et cetera, et cetera.
No, absolutely. And there we really see, this is actually also a change we've seen in Europe, including in my own country, that a significant size of the housing has been moved from public housing to a housing market. And the super rich increasingly see housing as a very good investment because it's safe, it's stable, it has a good return. And then, of course, they try to what they always do, to try to maximize the returns, which means they try to maximize the rent they can ask. And that's and then really housing becomes a complete commodity, whereas we should really see housing as something that meets a human right, a basic need. So it is really also something about changing the ways in which we look at some of those things.
Let's talk about fiscal action. You say the tax rate. How would you determine where the cutoff line is? I can, and let's just start with the premise of in 1960, I believe it was, and certainly through the 50s in the post-world era here, that the tax rate, the top marginal tax rate was 90%. 90 cents of every dollar earned above, which I believe at that time was $470,000. And in today's dollars would be somewhere around $3 million. That was the tax rate, I think, more or less at its peak for about 10, 15 years. In the wake of World War II, it's also brought about what was called the Great Compression, where we had the lowest amount of wealth inequality in this country's history. And the biggest expansion of our economy. There was obviously a lot of other things that were going on, and there were also people who were left out of it in this country. But what's the mechanism in which to set the rates, and at which point, we're going to take 100 cents out of every dollar?
Yeah. So I don't think I think 90 may be possible, although economists would say then you're actually what they call at the wrong side of the Laffer curve, so your tax revenue will go down because of incentive effects. But mainstream economists only look at maximizing tax revenue when they think about what they call optimal tax rates. I think we should not just look at revenue, but we should also look at what wealth inequality does to what we discussed earlier, democracy, but also environmental aspects and so on. So it's not just about the tax rate, but it's especially about what you tax. And here we just see that we keep talking about taxing income from, overall income, but mainly income from labor, and we keep capital gains off the hook. And the super rich, they tend not to have an income from labor. They have an income from capital and increases in capital or from profits. And so that is really where we should have a discussion. And there you see, in all countries, you see that it's really difficult to move that discussion because it really requires people to become more political and more mobilized. And the other problem, of course, is that capital is internationally mobile. We close our borders for human beings who want to move from one country to another. In Europe, we even let them drown in the Mediterranean. I mean, plenty. Every week people drown because we don't want to let Africans enter Europe, but can go wherever it wants. So we really need to regulate the flows of capital, and that requires international cooperation and also the closing of tax havens. So I've had a couple of journalists ask me, if you were the president of the country, what was the first thing you would do? And I said, organize international an international debate among politicians to close tax havens. And it seems strange, what does that have to do with limitarianism? But it is the precondition in order to then better tax capital flows and just also find all the money that is hidden right now and doesn't get taxed at all.
Well, what is, and I need to, at the risk of forgetting to push back on the Laffer curve for a moment, but what is the differential in Europe in terms of capital gains versus tax on labor or wages?
So it is still the case that I should first say each country sets its own tax rates. So that is that differs between countries. Most countries have some form of taxation on the income from capital. not a wealth tax directly, but those tend to be lower than definitely the highest rates on income from labor. So we had, for example, in the Netherlands, under the last government, there was a sort of an audit done on wealth inequality and on how that relates to the tax system. And the people who did that, the economists that did the analysis, found that the very richest, so it's less than 1% of the population, but those that really have the most concentrated wealth holdings, pay fewer taxes. Why? Because, and that is over all countries, they have most of their income from capital gains. So they have capital that generates an income that's taxed at a lower rate, and they're sometimes also able to, game the system, find loopholes, and so on. And in that respect, I think what the American patriotic millionaires are trying to do by really trying to highlight all these loopholes that you can use if you have capital, but that you can't use if you only have labor, is very important.
I have to push back on the Laffer curve citation, because I am unfamiliar with any example where the Laffer curve actually, I imagine if you tax 100% of every dollar that someone makes, you might see people less inclined to work. It seems to me. But short of that, have you ever seen any sort of like data that suggests that Laffer curve is actually anything other than an interesting theory?
But I hope I said this correctly. It's what economists say.
Right.
So there was actually a review also of my book in The Economist last week, and the reviewer just puts this as a fact. But there was also a very long time, there was a so-called fact, which is that when economies develop, inequality goes down. And when I studied economics, admittedly, that was some decades ago, I was also taught that we don't need to really worry about inequality, because when economies develop, inequality goes down. And that was, I think, really the power of Thomas Piketty's work, that he showed that this was merely an assumption. And that is the problem with economics as a discipline, that it has all these so-called laws that really are not always based on empirical research. They just believe it.
I would love to introduce that writer to the state of Kansas and Governor Brownback's experiment with the Laffer curve, and see that writer's reaction to how effective the Laffer curve is. But let's move to the last one. And I guess the other thing too, I wanted to say too about when we were just on the Capitol. What about the notion of and I know this is, we're a little bit off from that, and maybe in terms of like from a practical standpoint, but a wealth tax, because one of the things that I think the wealthy do, and we see it in the context of Elon Musk, right? Like when I say he bought Twitter, I don't mean he bought Twitter with his money. He bought Twitter with other people's money. And having a fortune like this also allows you to borrow money at virtually a 0% interest rate in many instances. And to borrow that money, I can have $1 billion in the bank. And if I keep it in, this bank, I can also turn to this bank and say, I want a $30 million loan, essentially interest free. That $30 million is not considered a income in any way. It's not a capital gains. It's not a wage income. And meanwhile, my $1 billion is sitting in the bank right now getting, 3, 4, 5%. Maybe I have it in treasuries. I'm making money on that. I'm going to be able to pay back that $50 million just based upon what my earnings are. And I mean, I guess maybe this constitutes a tax loophole, or I can just wait until I pass away and my estate pays for it. But these are all sort of mechanisms that I guess would fall into that rubric of structural changes in terms of like what we allow banks to do and what kind of line of credit we give, and going after wealth as opposed to revenue.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And here really, I mean, I've tried to make the case for reducing wealth inequality based on arguments from moral philosophy and political philosophy. But I think if some open-minded economists and legal scholars interested in fiscal issues would also lay out all the different ways in which basically the rich get a much better deal from the system than the middle classes or the poor, then you just see how unfair the whole system is. And yeah, that's what we, I think, need to, in many different ways, need to get across to the population, because I don't know how else we're ever going to try to address these issues if we don't mobilize the population at large.
You have a concept in the book where you would say, okay, this is what we're going to do from a statutory standpoint. I'm making up numbers off the top of my head now, but you're only allowed to make, let's say, $3 million a year. And that's the limit on it. But ethically, you really should only make $1 million a year. I think those numbers are different relative to what you put in, but that's the dynamic. We want to create a culture where you're looked askance a little bit if you're making over $1 million a year, even though we would put the statutory limit, higher than that. What,
exactly?
How do we go about, like, what's the sequencing here? Because I'm curious as to, like, how do you perceive this changed in the early 80s or the late 70s that brought about the situation we have now?
Yes, so that's a great question, because I really think this is the key to understanding what needs to be done now. And here we should look at the work that historians of economic and political thought did by uncovering basically the development of neoliberalism as an ideology and then later as a dominant policy package. So the neoliberal thinkers, they started to work. They started in Austria. They also had a colloquium in Paris before the Second World War. But basically, they kicked off really with an organization called Mont Pelerin Society in 1947, and they started to spread their thinking, and there they were backed up by a number of think tanks that again were subsidized or funded by very affluent entrepreneurs and people. And it took them, what is important to realize is that it took them a couple of decades in between the first ideas were developed and that they could seize political power. And they did that in the U.S. in the person of Ronald Reagan, who ironically is just came from Hollywood.
Right.
So he was just basically playing a role, and the role, what he had to play, was given to him by the people who wanted to push the neoliberal agenda. And I think that's why I also believe we need many different people who contribute to this ideological turn. That's in the end what we need. My only really, really big worry is, well, first of all, not that in the meantime there's also millions of people suffering because they don't have the basic needs provided that they should have provided by healthcare and education and so on. But also, the problem is that we are transgressing rapidly planetary boundaries. So we don't have like 3-4 decades to make this ideological turn. Somehow we will have to do it quicker. And here I also am just like looking and thinking, okay, how are we going to do this?
What was the sequencing? Was there a cultural change first? Was there an ethical change first, or was there a structural ideological change that happened in government?
I am not 100% sure, but what I am sure of is that there were first the ideas, then the ideas started to spread, then the ideas started to influence policymakers, politicians, and so on. So basically, you buy your way, or you find your way with these ideas into the system, and the system is then the government and companies and so forth. I think so. It's difficult to say whether how that would now work, because I mean, if you look at people who are young now, they are brought up with those ideas about competitiveness, about desert, about meritocracy. They just think this is what it is. They've forgotten about other reasons. One may be motivated, intrinsic reasons, or they may see some things as inevitable or normal only because they've grown up in this system. And that is really a question how to turn that. But I think so structures and individuals, I would just say everybody should try to do whatever they can to turn that tide. I don't think it's one or the other, and I also don't think we have the luxury to choose between those two scenarios.
Ingrid Robeyns, humanities professor at Utrech University in the Netherlands, author of Limitarianism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. We will put a link to that book at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Just a reminder. Oh, this is the 20th anniversary week of the Majority Report. We're going to be having 20th anniversary celebrations all year long. That will be marked by, I'm not sure what, probably not much. But we will very shortly have some commemorative merch in the merch shop. We may even, do a special 20th anniversary membership drive a little bit later in spring. And I'm going to tease this now because I think it's actually going to happen. I hired my child to actually do some of this. Every day I do something like this. It basically organizes all the stories that I have in a packet. And I've done that since the very beginning of the show. I mean, that's why I keep referring to it as chat. And I think it was, from radio, Janine and I would be chatting instead of interviewing a guest. I don't know. But I have 20 years of packets, digital, but I only have 8 years of these. Because at one point, I threw out a bunch a long time ago. It never occurred to me, why would I want to keep this? But then,
right.
I got lazy, didn't throw them out. And then I'm like, wait a second, I'm going to have the 20th anniversary. So right now, I have indentured labor working on putting together a book of the last 8 years of these. Just a way for you to look back and look at the crap show that we've been involved in really for the past 8 years.
Right.
And so if we can get that together, we're going to be selling those this year as well. But in the meantime, we're going to have T-shirts and mugs that should be up hopefully in the next couple of days. And on Friday, we're going to have a special 20th anniversary show. Atrios, one of the first guests, if not the first guest.
Wow.
Pretty close. I think he was on that first day of the Majority Report will be on. I'm very excited about this.
Atrius doesn't miss, so that's...
No, I can't. I will save my my story about how excited I was to have him on the program. I think we had Chappelle and maybe Bill Maher on that same show, and all I cared about was that Atrius was going to be on. Janine Garofalo will be on the program on Friday. Of course, I couldn't do that without having Janine. Now it's going to be pre-taped because she's not going to be available. We're going to have her on. Mark Maron will be calling in on Friday. He was not part of the Majority Report, but he was there at the beginning of Air America. And
nice of him.
May have the voice of the Majority Report, who has been the voice of the Majority Report for 20 years on.
What's that guy's name?
Benjamin something. I'll look it up. But he is on. And hopefully we'll get maybe Kyle to call in, because Kyle's been an integral part of this program, even prior to this iteration. And we will talk about that story with Kyle. So
I'm very excited about some of this lore to hear more and more about it. That'll be fun.
Yes, it'll be fun. We should be fun. Folks, you can be a part of this 20-year juggernaut. This massive operation we have, teeming with people running in and out of the studio, and of course downstairs in the press room that we have, and folks in finance and R&D. Everybody's going to come up. We're all going to be on one floor for the first time in probably years.
Wow!
All the huge staff of the Majority Report. You can be part of this by becoming a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you allow the show to survive and thrive. And maybe we'll talk a little bit. There was, over the years, we've had a couple of people who were really very generous to the show.
Mike Cernovich.
Mike Cernovich was very helpful. Very helpful.
Stephen Crowder.
Stephen Crowder.
Dave Rubin.
But we had, at the beginning of this iteration of the show, we had one member who was a Sam Seder member. And I do not remember his last name, but I do remember he was from Minnesota. I do remember his first name. And he was a Sam Seder member, I think, for a year. And it really made this show possible.
Yeah.
At that time. I don't know that we would have been able to do it. We've had one or two other really, two come to mind of people who have lent this show support, particularly early on. Would have offered buy us a computer here or there. I mean, stuff like that really made it possible. There's a lot of people who are responsible for the show to be existing today, but we'll talk about that later in the week. Also, I've got a couple of emails. If you're a listener from the Air America days and you have any shows that are downloaded, we've got one or two. Somebody sent me the famous Peaches show, which Janine and I will talk about. By all means, send it to us at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Plastic Ocean says, who is Kyle? What exactly does he do for the show? Always wondered, but this question has never been answered on air to my knowledge. It has, but we'll save it for Friday to get you to tune in. That's called the tease in the business. Emma.
Yes.
ESVN.
We'll be talking March Madness.
100% Celtics.
Oh, yes. I know that's what you would like.
Why would you talk about anything else? They're on an 80%.
over there.
80%.
Matt is so bitter about that. We'll get to the NBA.
We're talking about a team
I know
that is on the brink of maybe being one of the all-time winningest teams in any professional sports.
I'm aware. We'll see, though. I mean, can they make those threes in the playoffs? We shall see. They're going to run away with the East. The West, definitely more interesting. Well, we'll touch on the NBA. I mean, we're going to talk March Madness, both the women's and the men's, because now that the women can use the March Madness branding, it appears like the fan base for women's basketball is exploding. Caitlin
That's a
Clark.
funny thing about all this Daily Wire stuff is I watched Some More News did a Lady Ballers takedown, which you'd really like it because it gets into the film errors of it, just basic stuff. But if you wanted to invest in sports, it would be women's sports right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Because the growth potential and the growth rate there is just massive.
Well, the
compared to men's.
WNBA. I was listening to Larry David on Rich Eisen, and Larry was like, I can't like pay attention to March Madness. I've got too much with the Knicks and the Rangers. I was like, very relatable. And he said, and Rich was like, can you name one male college basketball player? And Larry was like, I can only name one, and it's Caitlin Clark. I mean, and I just think the women's game is really exploding. Anyway, we'll be talking about that, and then I also want to give a little bit of an NHL update because we're approaching the playoffs there, and that is wide open in the East and the West.
I haven't paid attention to college basketball since Holy Cross was named in the top 10 in 1972.
That's not even
Before the
where.
three-point line.
Oh, I guess because that was Worcester,
Yeah.
right? So was that a big deal for you guys?
I mean, I was 6, but
Yeah.
I mean, they were going to be part of the Big East
Yeah.
at that time, but then they just decided, whatever.
Yeah.
Why would you do that if you're from Worcester?
Right.
Matt!
Left Reckoning, David Griscom and I had a Sunday show yesterday. We got into Dave Rubin talking with the banjo player from Mumford & Sons about sort of Philip K. Dick style dystopian futures, and also Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens are doing witch hunting now, so that's their pivot.
646-257-3920. We will try and take some phone calls today, but we will definitely take some tomorrow. Call at Kaliat Emptor, I would say.
What?
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking
Oh,
for
wow.
a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this CBD?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is this?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
Positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35 501 1 half 3 8s
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about
Yeah.
you is just like every day, all day, like
Yeah.
everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back.
Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Christmas Tree Farm. Don't know if you guys have already heard about this. Maybe other Dutch MR fans already sent you something about this, but Candace Owens showed up at the conference, a Dutch fascist party this weekend. I did not hear that. I canceled my Dutch fascist newsletter because my inbox was getting too clogged up. During her speech, she claimed that every 18-year-old guy today has pink hair and encouraged people to take pride in being called conspiracy theorists. She did all this while standing next to the party leader, who's literally said that he believes black people are less intelligent than white people. I think maybe if he had narrowed it down to a specific individual standing next to him, yeah, she's something very special. Union Jack can't agree with Emma more. The delayed intent of an intervention is useless at a geopolitical level. The delayed intent of an intervention? I'm not sure I fully follow.
I don't really follow it either, but
too many lives lost, too much money committed and sent to enable and execute a genocide. I mean, certainly the question I think you could ask is like, why? What is the rationale for the U.S. now not vetoing this UN resolution versus the other four? It's only political. It's only a political one. There is no rationalization for it. Also, please correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but when talking about our country's continued support of the genocide, you keep saying the United States. Is that a way to disassociate from the reality that you are a taxpayer and supporter of the president who's enabling the genocide? Would I am a United States citizen. It's implicit. I don't know what else I would say. I don't think it's just Joe Biden that's doing it. I do think it's actually the country that is supporting the this by our tax dollars.
It certainly feels like Yanis Varoufakis talks about feeling complicit in genocide, and I think that's absolutely like the right feeling. I would say you can overcorrect for that, and collapsing, say, a regular taxpayer's complicity and Joe Biden's is a bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah, I think that's different. In terms of being a supporter of the president, I'm not a supporter of the president. I think you should vote for him over to keep the other guy out of office.
I prefer certain coalitions in power over others.
That's a
that's an odd comment. Would you say the same thing about, like, are we supposed to say Netanyahu's actions every single time we speak about Israel? Because also that would be wrong. It's not just Netanyahu, it's the structure of our government. It's not just Biden, it's the structure of our government. We're so institutionally like...
I actually think that Biden is arguably the but for in this instance. I don't think we're ever going to see anybody, but the fact is that yes, our country, I felt the same way when George W. Bush was waging war in Iraq, and I didn't vote for George W. Bush, but I also felt complicit in the war we were waging there. I think it's arguable that if you were to send yourself to prison because you refused to pay for your taxes, because you didn't, you wanted to object to what the country was doing, maybe then you're in the the neighborhood of having no responsibility for it.
As far as like what potency exists trying to get Biden to change course, I think like unions that have called for a ceasefire are good, and I think the uncommitted Democrat primary voters have done a lot, and so I think
definitely,
I would probably keep that in mind before judging everybody who participates in that sort of process complicit as Joe Biden.
Big news, folks. Most of you are probably aware of this already, I would imagine. But in response to the U.S. abstaining at the UN, Bibi Netanyahu has officially canceled a delegation that was coming to the U.S.
I'll have to cancel my dinner reservations with those
guys.
Oh
my goodness. Oh my goodness.
The delegation isn't coming?
Not the delegation.
Folks.
Genocide Air delegation is Gonna save some gas money.
What
now.
if Israel's delegation never comes again to the United States? What will we do?
Folks, all we can tell you at this time is just stay in your homes and wait until further information. That's the only thing that we can advise you at this time.
Do you know what's really funny is Israel trying to like exert international, I saw Ed Germentum kind of make this point a little bit earlier, but like international pressure on the United States, the world superpower, by saying like, oh, buddy, how are you guys going to fare without us coming and showing diplomatic relations through our delegation?
What's fascinating is that I think the Netanyahu government must be somewhat deluded as to the political implications of them doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I suspect, this is complete conjecture on my part, that they just cannot believe how Biden's reacted to this.
Yep.
And that it must be a concern of Biden's politically that he will lose the Israel supporters' votes if he doesn't act in this way, which is completely unfounded by the data, incidentally. But I am sure like they're like, what? I can't believe it. He's like, don't do this. Here's some weapons. And I think Netanyahu must think that like this is going to put Biden in hot water. I will tell you this. That is all resolved. There is not a single person, I think, who is going to look at this and all of a sudden change their perspective on whether they're going to vote for Biden,
right?
Based upon Netanyahu's delegation not coming. I'll remind you, Netanyahu like openly campaigned against Obama, and it did not implicate his Jewish vote or probably the Christian Zionist vote either. Like they're not going to vote for him, and they didn't.
Right.
And the Jewish vote is going to still overwhelmingly vote for Biden, regardless of. I think they would have. I don't think it would have made a difference if he come out for ceasefire in day one. He wouldn't have lost any votes over that.
Yeah. Right.
This is not. Joe Biden is not operating. With elections in mind, to the extent that he should, never mind the morality of this or any of those questions.
And I mean, this is just who Netanyahu is. I just want to be clear here. This was in Haaretz when basically Netanyahu has always been an incredibly arrogant politician. James Baker, this is a paragraph here, temporarily banned him from the State Department. Madeleine Albright described him as an Israeli Newt Gingrich, and it wasn't a compliment. Bill Clinton emerged from his first meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996, then serving his first term as prime minister, more than a little annoyed by his brash self-confidence. "Who's the effing superpower here?" Clinton exclaimed to his aides. That's kind of a famous quote. But Netanyahu has always been extremely arrogant, is unyielding in his belief that he has the ability to play American politicians like a fiddle, and that he has unwavering belief that he can influence U.S. public opinion. I mean, that's what he was saying when there was beginning to be pushback at the start after October 7th. So, like, this is the hubris that I think usually comes before the fall. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be, I think, tens of thousands more Palestinians who die. I mean, just because of starvation, even if the bombing and the killing were to stop.
Pappy thinks that Israeli society, saw him a couple weeks ago on an interview, thinks that Israeli society has a bunch of headwinds with regards to material reality, that these sorts of pressures, it's
I saw that on the Electric Intifada, right? Was that the one?
No, but it probably
he said something similar. Like he's not sure when, but he thinks that there's a major change coming there. I had a conversation with a guy who served in the IDF, and he. It was more reasonable than I would have anticipated, but also I think there's a sort of something structural happening there in terms of but he believes that the Israeli population is one big loss for the IDF away from turning on this whole thing. He thinks that the military is like, not interested. I mean, we'll see. I wonder. I think really the way that this ends is the U.S. saying we're done, and I don't know when that happens. But maybe this helps. Here is AOC on the House floor on Friday. She followed this up with an appearance on Sunday on CNN to clarify what she was saying with the word genocide in this speech on the floor of the House.
I think she's the second member of Congress to call this a genocide on the floor of the House. Rashida Tlaib did so months ago. AOC is now using her sizable influence from a Democratic Party donation perspective, her ability to raise a ton of money, and her being kind of like the de facto leader of young progressives in the public. So when she says genocide, people listen. And that's why I think this was... I had a few conversations with people myself, just normie, like Democrats, but they're younger and who are disgusted by this, who said, what took her so long, right? And I was surprised to hear those people say that because they're not that obsessed with this.
To be fair, she was very consciously coming up short and saying she defends the right of people to do it, which is what she defends Rashida Tlaib's right to call it a genocide.
Yes.
Which is, again, that's when pressure needs to be applied.
My point, though, is just that she, what I would I would defend her in this instance where she has a very strategic position that she's trying to wield to great effect to actually influence. And you can even see it how she frames the speech, literally flattering Joe Biden and speaking to him. But I think that it's a smart tactic.
Here's that speech.
Mr. Speaker, I know a man, a decent man, who said that preventing genocide is an achievable goal. A goal that requires a level of government organization and engagement that matches in its intensity the brutality and efficiency required to carry out mass killing. Too often, these efforts have come too late, after the best and least costly opportunities to prevent them have been missed. The man that said that was then Vice President and now President Joseph Biden. And he was right. Mr. Speaker, I rise to say that such a time is now. As we speak, in this moment, 1.1 million innocents in Gaza are at famine's door. A famine that is being intentionally precipitated through the blocking of food and global humanitarian assistance by leaders in the Israeli government. This is a mass starvation of people, engineered and orchestrated, following the killing of another 30,000, 70% of whom were women and children killed. There is hardly a single hospital left. And this was all accomplished, much of this accomplished with U.S. resources and weapons. If you want to know what an unfolding genocide looks like, open your eyes. It looks like the forced famine of 1.1 million innocents. It looks like thousands of children eating grass as their bodies consume themselves while trucks of food are slowed and halted just miles away. It looks like good and decent people who do nothing, or too little, too late. It is against United States law to provide weapons to forces who block United States humanitarian assistance. And that is exactly what is happening right now. So much so that the president himself stated during the State of the Union that the United States must and will be building its own port to let aid through. It will be too late. The time is now to force compliance with U.S. law and the standards of humanity and fulfill our obligations to the American people to suspend the transfer of U.S. weapons to the Israeli government in order to stop and prevent further atrocity. Honoring our alliances does not mean facilitating mass killing. We cannot hide from our responsibility any longer. Blocking assistance from one's closest allies to starve 1 million people is not unintentional. We have a responsibility to prove the value of global democracy, enshrined in the upholding of civil society, rule of law, and commitment to human and civil rights. This is not just about Israel or Gaza. This is about us. The world will never be the same, and we will never be the same. And we must write our story in this moment of what it means and who we are as Americans. And our story must be not that we were good men who did nothing, but that we were a committed democracy that did something. And we must prove that now. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
I mean, it's well said.
Powerful.
Would
Yes.
be, definitely would have been helpful. Well, I don't know. I mean, from just an emotional standpoint, it would have been good to hear that earlier. I don't know whether you save your powder for now, like when you're closer to a tipping point or not. I don't know. People can debate that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, Dick Durbin came out and said ceasefire 4 months ago. Did anybody remember that? I mean, he's
Well, she said ceasefire from the beginning. It's just now she's saying genocide.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like whenever there's a delta between the elected representatives and the movements, then you need to get something for that. And hopefully this gets something, holding that back a little bit. And, you know, I don't know how much it's going to mean to Biden, if he's going to care at all.
I don't really necessarily care what it means for Biden in the same of like how he's responding to that. What I do care is what it says to like the average Democrat when they hear AOC say that, right? I think it says something different than when Rashida Tlaib says it, just because of her relative prominence and how she's positioned herself within the Democratic Party.
Well, I mean, I think the bottom line is like when Rashida Tlaib says it, people don't hear it as much.
They're racist about it too.
Well, I mean, without a doubt, there's a lot of people I think who say, well, she's Palestinian. Of course, she's going to say that. But I mean, the reality is that AOC has a name recognition that dwarfs Tlaib's. Like, I mean, just
right.
And I don't know that we fully appreciate that because we will talk about Tlaib as, you know, more or less as often as we will AOC. But I think like for your average person, Democrat,
that's
remember,
my point.
Yeah,
that's my point.
Yeah,
my point. Yeah, my point is her name recognition with normie Democrats is significantly, and also her cachet with them. Just I've seen it as the years have gone on. Like, oh, I kind of like her, right? I mean, for a while, her name recognition among Republicans was higher than it was among Democrats. But I think that's changed a little bit. And then I just also will add, I think that the clear, deliberate famine of it, you can, as I said at the start of the show, a lot of international law experts say that the deliberate famine and the blocking of food is basically sufficient to prove intent outside of the genocidal statements that were issued by the Israeli government in the lead up to the genocidal bombing campaign, right? That's going to be delineated in the ICJ. But the deliberate famine element, that action some think is sufficient to prove intent. And my guess is that based on what the timing of this and what she had to say here, that is the shared kind of consensus within her team.
I mean, the bottom line is we're never going to, well, I should say, we won't be getting a ruling on the question of genocide for years. The bottom line is, though, is making the sort of the case within the context of the popular consciousness. I still haven't heard, like, wasn't Blinken supposed to certify? We heard anything about the certification of whether Israel is upholding the requirements to be eligible for U.S. military aid? That was supposed to have happened, and it seems to be extremely quiet. I mean, I they slow walk these things, but eventually it has.
So at least per Barak Ravid at Axios from last March 14th, that Defense Minister Gallant signed on Thursday a letter to the administration assuring Israel will use U.S. weapons according to international law and allow U.S.-supported humanitarian aid into Gaza. Two Israeli and U.S. officials told Axios.
And did Blinken then certify, or the letter came from Israel?
Letter came from Israel.
Everybody laughed while they wrote it.
Blinken has until today to certify that Israel's written commitments.
Okay, so we're going to know at the end of the day today. I hope that delegation wasn't the one that's supposed to deliver that letter.
Oh my gosh!
Oh no, this is all one big miscommunication.
Look what you made us do. Now you can't certify the letter.
Yep. What should we do next? This is, let's do this one from Chuck Todd. So NBC hired Ronna McDaniel. Romney. Is she allowed to use Romney now that she's not working for Trump? She was the former chair to RNC. Now, look, I have real issues with how many Republicans work for MSNBC. And I have never been an employee of MSNBC. I've had a pay for appearance contract at times. I'm probably outside that contract, or maybe not. I haven't billed them for anything. I haven't been on in over a year, I think. But even then, I stopped billing them. Like, it was only a couple of times. But that was really more of a function of tough time getting a babysitter in COVID, and then I grew a beard. But there is a difference between like a Michael Steele and a Ronna McDaniel. And that is Michael Steele's lies that he propagated as the chair of the RNC were sort of like within the sort of bounds of like political lying. Mm-hmm. Ronna McDaniel participated in orchestrating an event that has sent many people to jail. That's like a different order of magnitude. And, far be it from me to give Chuck Todd credit. It's interesting. This is where they chose to make their stand. Nicole Wallace worked for George W. Bush. I think that guy was a war criminal. But here is Chuck Todd. I think he articulates a couple of points that are, interesting here. There's a lot of theories as to why NBC hired Ronna McDaniel. One is like they're gearing up for the potential of a Donald Trump administration, and they want to be seen as being like fair-handed. Now, I don't know who that's for, because Trump doesn't like Ronna McDaniel. But presumably, like, they think, well, if we are showing balance, I don't know what the theory is behind it.
My guess is it's going to be a Michael Steele situation where she comes on, slowly walks into Trump criticism, but supports everything else from the Republican Party. Steele was doing that.
But-
I mean, recently he's been saying like, oh, Trump's the nominee. Like he's going to be the nominee while the rest of the other anchors were inflating Nikki Haley. So, I mean, I don't know. Like perhaps to give some inside look into Republican voters.
Yes.
But she has no idea.
But that's
voters,
that's the other point.
Politicians.
She is on the outside now. Like she was on the outside even when she was at the RNC.
Exactly.
So here is Chuck Todd who presents that sort of notion. MSNBC has announced that they're not going to have her on the air. They have no plans to.
And there was some reporting in Politico earlier that this clip from Chuck Todd is responding that Kristen Welker interviewed Ronna McDaniel prior, but it was not clear whether she was still in her active capacity in the RNC or as a paid contributor doing the interview.
So the interview was booked prior to her being hired by NBC, and then it became sort of like, oh, what do we do now? Right. But here is Chuck Todd, and he raises the point of like, what value is she bringing? And that is a really good question.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. Well, I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? But once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here? I will say this. I think your interview did a good job of exposing, I think, many of the contradictions. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. So it is, that's where you begin here. And so when NBC made the decision to give her NBC News' credibility, you got to ask yourself, what does she bring NBC News? And when we make deals like this, and I've been at this company a long time, you're doing it for access to audience. Sometimes it's access to an individual, and we can have a journalistic ethics debate about that. And I'm willing to have that debate. And if you told me we were hiring her as a technical advisor to the Republican convention, I think that would be certainly defensible. If you told me we're talking to her, but let's see how she does in some interviews and maybe vet her with actual journalists inside the network, see if it's a two-way, what she can bring the network. So I do think, unfortunately, this interview is always going to be looked through the prism of who is she speaking for, right? I think you did everything you could do. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this interview, and then all of a sudden the rugs pull out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program, but I am glad you did the best that you could, and that's why the three of us are on here to try to bolster that editorial independence.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I didn't pick this up in the first time I heard this, but he's nervous.
He's so nervous.
You can
Crowder.
Totally. And I can understand some measure of nervousness.
Absolutely.
You're going out and you're basically inviting your bosses to fire you. Now, of course, they won't do it today. They'll do it several months from now is when it'll happen. But the real question is like, what's the value? Never mind to NBC News, but that's the sort of like the mediator, right? What's the value to the public? Like what insights is she going to bring? Like he had a good point. Like, yeah, you could bring her on as a technical advisor for the convention because she may, understand sort of like some of the inner workings of how that's working because she ran one most recently, but she's on the outs with the Trump people. She who is she providing access to? Like, what is the value of that? It really is. And CNN apparently was also like interviewing her, maybe ABC News. It's garbage. And it really reeks of like a Comcast-y type of edict. And the best part is though, is that the head of MSNBC, is it Rashida Jones? Is it? Yeah. She certainly must have signed off on this. It would have been NBC News, and then CEO. I think she's CEO of MSNBC, or president maybe. She would have signed off on us, but she's also the person who now says like she's not coming on our network. So
also here's my alternate theory too: is that he doesn't host Meet the Press anymore, right? When did Chuck Todd get booted off of Meet the Press
Not
for
that
Welker,
long ago,
right? He might think I don't have much to lose here.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, like the idea where, I helmed Meet the Press for a certain kind of reporter. This is like a dream come true. He's no longer there. I guess if it was a few months ago, if not a year ago, where she took over. September.
6 months.
So
mess around, he might team up with Don Lemon.
Empire Strikes Back. Does he even have does he still have his daily show on MSNBC?
If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure he's known as the chief political analyst, but I don't believe he has his own show anymore. I think that's just now like a roving role.
And look, they've hired people who you really like, spies. Like Brennan, who was I don't want to say a pathological liar, because pathological liars lie for no reason.
Official liar to the government.
He was an official liar.
So was Jen Psaki, by the way. That's also what the White House press person does. Is they're liars for the administration? It's a level down.
Press
from being
people like Fox is hired. And,
I understand.
And people go from that. Like I get that more, because they're not in a sort of real policy position, and everybody knows that's their job.
Yes.
To present the White House position. And you saw that, like, what's her face on the Five? What's her? Who's on the
Dana Perino.
Dana Perino and Tony
and Kayleigh McEnany too. The other Trump.
Tony. What the heck was that guy's name? Tony Roberts went from Fox into the administration. I mean, Sean Hannity worked for Donald Trump while he was hosting a show virtually. I mean. I get that, but in this instance, it's pretty unique. But where were the people talking about? How
do we trust this person?
Yeah, and even like, let's say, like, Malcolm Nance. To be honest with you, like, we had him on this program. He said something to me about. It was about, gosh, I can't remember.
Anwar al-Awlaki's kid.
Anwar al-Awlaki's kid. Something I had never heard before. That when we killed Anwar al-Awlaki's kid, that he had a gun with him or something, which not even the government made that claim. And I asked him about it. I ran into him in a green room at MSNBC. This was years and years ago. I think we had him on, 6 years ago. I don't know what it was. And I said, hey, he said, well, you got to have me back on for my book or something like that. I think he had come out. We had him on for a book about Islam.
Yeah.
And then he had another book about Russia, I think, in the run up to the election. And I said, yeah, listen, I gotta tell you, I specifically asked Jeremy Scahill, I think I did it on air, about Anwar al-Awlaki's son. And I've asked a lot of people, and I've done a lot of research, and I've never seen a single person ever claim that this guy had a gun. I've seen, like, horrible Obama administration officials say, like, he had the wrong father. But I've never even seen this claim. And I said, like, do you have a link for this? And he's like, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm a former spy. And I'm like, I don't, how do I have you on my show again if you're saying that, like, your classification of yourself means that you don't have to substantiate what you're saying? Like, you see, that puts me in a precarious situation. And that was the end of our relationship. But the point being that this is someone who was not just lying to the press about sort of like the sort of typical banal stuff. This is someone who actually schemed with Trump to do something that has sent people to prison.
Yep.
And at what value to the public? Like, what are we gaining from this? So, good for Chuck Todd.
I mean,
he should have, Chuck Todd wouldn't have believed what was going on 15, 20 years ago. So that's that.
It's interesting to see him look so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I have to.
Glazer up there.
You fight that sort of inclination to go like, oh well, why are you being so hysterical? I mean, I remember these people. Should we?
Candace and Dave.
Oh, I'm thinking number 3, Kevin McCarthy. This is also fun. You gotta love like people who've lost their jobs and then come back to finally like sort of get into like a Bulworth type of situation where they get to speak from the heart. And here is Sean McCarthy. Man, he looks psychotic. Put that picture up. Like, I get really like what.
I mean, he's in a lot of pain.
It's either
right now.
Sean McCarthy or it's like a cutout of Sean McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy.
Sorry, Kevin McCarthy. I don't know where I get the Sean.
You're thinking of Hannity?
Yeah, Sean. Yeah, who knows? But here he is with Jesse Waters. And
Sam can't tell all the Irish guys apart.
No, I can't actually. Everyone I knew named McCarthy.
So bigoted.
Everybody I knew named McCarthy in Worcester was named Sean. Or Seamus.
Or Kevin.
Or Kathleen. No, not Kevin.
Okay.
No. So here's Kevin McCarthy, former Speaker of the House and former congressman. And in many ways responsible for like many people followed him out the door very quickly. When he quit early, I think that gave license to Buck to quit early, to Gallagher to quit early. And now the Republican caucus has 217 sitting members and the Democrats have 213. So if they lose one vote, it becomes 216 to 214. But if they lose 2 votes, it's 215 to 215. They can't do anything. Here is Kevin McCarthy.
Jesus Christ.
Talking to...
That's how irrelevant you are, Kevin, now that you're out of office.
Exactly.
Who cares?
Here's this dude talking to Jesse Waters.
Well, I don't know what they're doing spending now, but when I became Speaker, I instituted a 72-hour rule that got not just the members the opportunity to read the bill, but America as well. You'd never waive it unless it's a continuing resolution, something you're already doing so people would know. I think it's always helpful to allow people to read the bill, allow America to read the bill. And really this comes down to what's happening in Congress today, goes back to when those 8 Republicans led by Gates partnered with every single Democrat to decide who could be Speaker. That's when Republicans lost the majority. Jesse, remember what we were able to do in a small majority the first 9 months? The strongest, most conservative border security bill, energy independent. We did a Parents' Bill of Rights. We stopped D.C. from decriminalizing. We stopped the pandemic officially. We stopped them from kicking out our men and women in the military who refused the vaccine. We had the biggest cut and savings voted on American history, more than $2 trillion. We got welfare reform. We cut $20 billion of that from the IRS that was going to hire to go after us. Very successful when you work together with a small majority, and all those bills had 72 hours to read them because people could get behind them.
So how do you now?
So that's a little dig at Mike Johnson there, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
He just threw Mike Johnson under the bus. And Mike Johnson's already gotten like a huge, intense anger from a couple of conservatives. And that's all it takes. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, wanting to get on television. And so Mike Johnson has got some real problems. Now, let me just add that Kevin McCarthy is full of absolute garbage bull. They didn't pass any of those things, or to the extent they did, none of it became law. They passed the fewest number of laws in the history of Congress by half. In other words, the record was set a couple of years ago, and then they halved that. I don't know if you'll be able to achieve this level of doing nothingness in the future. And it really is, in many respects, a failure of the Biden campaign not to be running against this do-nothing Congress.
It's also hilarious to me how he has the temerity to talk about Gates and those 8 extremist Republicans or whatever, and not mention the fact that he literally gave them the weapon that they needed to execute him, basically.
Exactly.
And wrote it into the agreement because he was so thirsty and desperate to be Speaker of the House that he said, hey, we'll do, as a part of my agreement to get the whole Republican caucus behind me, we'll do this motion to vacate. You can, if you're unhappy with me, you can kick me out anytime. And you know what? They did. And it doesn't matter how stupid and self-serving Matt Gaetz's reasoning was, or if it was because Nancy Mace didn't like Kevin McCarthy for certain reasons that bubble under the surface about his conduct. It doesn't matter of what the reasoning was. You allowed them to do so, and you got burned.
This bill that got passed, a $1.2 trillion budget, it is good until September, which is also just insane to me.
We get to do this all over again before the election.
Yeah, I don't know what the theory is behind that. If somehow, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine they're just going to pass a continuing resolution at that time. But I don't know if somebody thinks that it might be worth their while to have that fight at that time. But there's some real lowlights in this budget. Maybe we'll go through it a little bit more tomorrow. But it cuts UNRWA funding until next March, or suspends it. There's a lot of stuff missing in this budget in terms of like maintaining, let's say, the subsidies for high-speed internet. Of course, the Pentagon got everything that they wanted and more, as per usual. There is $3.8 billion for aid to Israel in there.
That's basically just maintaining the already existing
that's the annual sort of.
It's just restating it. Like, we will still do this. Don't worry. If you're committing a genocide, we'll still give you your dole.
Oh yes, we are complicit in black and white letters.
Yeah, but what about the Democratic wins in this bill? Oh wait, there are none.
But it is interesting to see the sort of like the worst of the worst trying to separate themselves from their equally worst of the worst. They just hate Matt Gaetz. And there's really not a huge ideological divide between these people. Matt Gaetz is just afraid of the ethics committee, and so he took this up. The other people that joined him, a couple of them are just absolute batcrap crazy. And Nancy Mace wanted to be on television a lot. Here's Newt Gingrich, one of the biggest grifters in American politics, who on with one of the biggest fascists on American politics.
Newt, if you were still Speaker, what would you say in response to the people hitting the exits?
Well, I think, first of all, you'd have to have a totally different approach. We shouldn't underestimate how bad what Matt Gaetz did was for the whole system. He unleashed the demons. He went after somebody who had raised $480 million, had gained seats for 3 elections in a row, and he drove Kevin McCarthy out of office. And from that point on, it has been a disaster. I don't blame Johnson. I think Speaker Johnson has a hand that's virtually impossible to play. And that's where I think some of the people just make it worse. This is the best argument I've seen for why we need not only to elect Donald Trump, but to elect a very large majority with him. When I was Speaker, I had a lot more ability than Johnson did to run the House because I had a big enough majority. You could have 5 or 10 people who were crazy, and you could still govern. He doesn't have a 1-vote majority. The fact is there are 8 or 10 or 12 people who are going to get up every morning voting no. The truth is they don't even know what they're voting on. All they know when they wake up in the morning is, I'm going to be a no today. So he really has no majority.
Name them. Name them. Not just Gates. Name them.
I know, the big bad Gates, who said, we might do this to you, Kevin McCarthy. And he said, okay, here you go. Just please don't do it. But
yeah, I think he said, I think the quote was, go for it.
Yeah.
Or bring it on.
Well, in the end, he said, bring it on. He tweeted that aged so poorly. But again, like, I can't.
I'm sorry, did I say bring it on?
Yeah.
I meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's move it along.
I mean, when have Republicans ever just voted no on something just to vote no on something?
Absurd that they would ever do that.
I've never heard of any instance of that.
It really is amazing the level of disarray that they're in. I mean, can you imagine if this was like the Democrats? I mean, can you imagine if the Democrats were in this type of disarray? It would be the only story we would hear about.
What's funny is the thing that Kevin McCarthy said about it. He's like, we were very productive with our majority. Like, it was like the actual person who could probably say that with a straight face is Nancy Pelosi because she had a pretty tight majority.
Yeah.
And there was very, very little rancor to actually like really destabilize anything to this type of magnitude.
Well, that was her
embarrassment for the party.
That was her kind of crowning, I guess, skill, right? The achievement was that she's been much better than Republicans at keeping her caucus together.
Without a doubt. And the Democrats have been a fairly unified caucus, and that's been helpful, at least in the context of when they were in the majority. Unfortunately, we had a president who opened the door for Republicans to sort of scuttle what could have been a transformative the piece of legislation. Here is the five also lamenting. There must have been like some type of notice sent out at Fox. We're mad at Matt Gaetz. But what's interesting is, and I guess we'll see, like, what did Matt Gaetz ultimately achieve? It is conceivable that we may not see support for Ukraine pass, although it's starting to head in that direction, that if Johnson wants to retain his speakership, reliant on Democratic votes, he will have to bring to the floor a bill to support Ukraine. I imagine they'll have to do that through a discharge petition again. That means 2/3, but I think there's probably 2/3 vote in the House for Ukraine funding. But here is, I'm sorry, not the five, the outnumbered. It's Fox's Emily Compagno and Kayleigh McEnany.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "I have not talked to President Trump about this." Largely, President Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson have had a great relationship. Speaker Mike Johnson just put out a tweet congratulating him on securing the nomination. Seems like a pretty big voice you'd want to get input from, since he's the titular head of the party at the moment.
I feel we are seeing yet another tantrum by a tiny faction of that conference that is disrupting the entire machine that we just exhaustively waited for to get back on track. And here we are again, watching someone steal the time, steal the audio, steal the limelight, steal the attention. She says we should have our attention on the illegals streaming across the border, on a million other things. No, our attention was on you while you gave a presser. I'm sick and tired of it. As a Republican, as an American citizen, I want them to get to work. I love Speaker Johnson. Who would be better than him, MTG? What is your plan? And I don't want my legislature taking 2 days up to vote for that, to figure everything out, to look incompetent during a presidential election year. This is the last thing I want to be subjected with. This is, it's frankly, at a minimum, it's disappointing.
There's a great irony here, Carly. As I'm listening to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I hear her say, There's a video that everyone is focused on. That video is of illegal immigrants rushing our border. It is a video about 6 minutes ago we were set to play. It is a video that you're not seeing right now because instead we are talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. It raises the question, she didn't make this live, so nothing happens for 2 weeks. Is this a fundraising exercise so you can go back to your district for 2 weeks and fundraise off of it? What's the motive here? I get you're not in her head, but what's the motive?
Yeah, well, I think the motive in part could be, this reminds me a lot of this scrum of media around Marjorie Taylor Greene. It reminds me of a lot of what happened with Matt Gaetz when he did this to Kevin McCarthy. You become the most powerful person in Washington during that period of time. So that could be part of her motive. Another part of the motive might also be because she doesn't like the spending bill, and that's what she'll say when she gets booked on conservative shows to talk about this. Mike Johnson is not, what did she say, an arm of the Democratic Party in terms of policy. He is a strong conservative. I think what's happening with him, I think anybody who becomes House Speaker, it's a very big challenge, especially when you're dealing with such a slim majority, and he wanted to avoid a government shutdown. And now look at what's happening.
I mean, I find this fascinating. They are like just unleashing on Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz. And what's also, I think, just stunning to me is that you've got all of these right-wing talkers on the same network, almost all in concert, doing this over the course of 24 hours, essentially, saying that Congress, the Republican caucus is broken. What bigger sort of invitation do you need? The idea is that the idea that they are out ahead of the Biden administration in publicizing this is just shocking to me.
Right, because I also don't think they would be this adamant if they didn't legitimately believe that this is like extremely politically harmful to them. Like
without a doubt,
problem.
They are trying to beat down. Like we need to be unified here and make it look like we're doing something. You know, this is the thing: is that and there's a story. We'll talk about this tomorrow. But Joe Biden is getting ready to push some type of like incredibly draconian. Immigration executive orders.
What Axios referred to as the nuclear option for immigration still being on the table for Biden.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. I got it here somewhere in my stack. I can't pull it up now. But here it is. He is going to supposedly they're like the bullets in the chamber. One of the sources they have. The orders being considered would ban people from entering the U.S. if they illegally crossed the border and made it harder for people to pass the first interview in the asylum-seeking process. This automatic criminality associated with people entering in the country without documentation. I mean, this is horrible. And instead of doing this is the lesson that they wanted to take from the Tom Suozzi race.
Who, by the way, said he'll save Mike Johnson on Friday. I think he said that to the press. So
the point out of the Tom Suozzi race was not that he convinced people who are anti-immigrant that he was more anti-immigrant or could be, because Joe Biden is not going to prove that he's more anti-immigrant than Donald Trump. It's that Congress is not doing anything. And so you can get up there and say, this is a do-nothing Congress. They're not doing anything about immigration reform, and get all the mileage you need from those people who are concerned about immigration to the extent that they're even available to you as voters. Because even Fox is admitting we're not doing anything. But the idea that Fox is going to say Joe Biden really does hate immigrants as much as Donald Trump does. It's just so blinkered. And it is such an anachronistic set of politics where you do not realize that it's important to bring out your voters.
It's hard to simultaneously like make the argument that the Texas immigration bill is so draconian and so kind of like out of step with the Biden administration, and then simultaneously basically just alluding to the fact that we just want to do the same thing but have it federalized.
Right. It's got to be federal for it to be really appropriate. So dumb.
So dumb.
And never mind how inhumane the policy is. Let's get to this information. The impeachment tomorrow. Let's read some IMs here. Oh, wait, it's already 2:30. Holy crap. What should we get to? Should we get one fun one?
Sure, one quick one. Why don't we just save the more, like the impeachment stuff for tomorrow?
Yep.
We can talk about.
All right, let's do Mike Lindell. Because this guy's still alive. Just barely hanging on. Folks. Sit down for this one. Mike Lindell has found evidence of voter fraud.
What?
Has he paid that $5 million to the guy who he challenged, who was incidentally a supporter of Mike Lindell's, but he happened to have computer skills? He made a challenge, $5 million, if you can prove that there was no voter fraud, and this guy sat down to do it as a lark. He proved it. And I think like in the latest round of the legal battle, Mike Lindell is into this guy for $5 million.
I mean, maybe Lindell is just hoping that he can continue to uncover evidence of voter fraud, like announce it every few months until he finally dies and doesn't have to pay any of this money.
Here is, and incidentally, Lindell is not allowed on any network with any
lawyers
because he has implicated all of them in suits that may bust these companies. And so he only can go on to Steve Bannon's program, where apparently Steve Bannon is has enough shell companies that he's protected from liability.
He's got his Chinese sugar daddy, though.
Exactly. I'll just shut down the Real America's Voice, and it'll come back tomorrow as the Real American Voice.
Yeah.
And Bannock's also basically awaiting trial for certain things with like the We Build the Wall.
Is he still awaiting trial for that?
And the
fraud.
contempt of Congress charge as well, because he refused to testify.
This is all like, there's so many people who are just like betting it all on delay and Trump gets elected, and that's the way I'm going to stay out of prison. That's my defense strategy.
Right.
But here he is with Mike Lindell, and Mike Lindell has some earth-shattering news. It turns out there wasn't just fraud in 2020. The fraud was also in 2022. What?
He does have the ability to force, by not passing this, to force a confrontation. Just don't pass it. This thing's an abomination. It turns back everything that we've worked for.
Oh, pause it. Okay. Incidentally, he's talking about Mike Johnson. He didn't want him to pass the budget.
He called that like disgraceful.
Close the government. Very shut down the government. I mean, he's consistent at least.
Mike Lindell's going to join us. Is Mike up? Mike, we got Mike Lindell. Mike, Kurt Olson gave a magnificent presentation today about the Fincham Kerry Lake situation. Walk us through. We know you're the machine guy.
Okay.
My question was why nobody.
You got to comment on the lion and.
Yeah, Jesus.
That's Jesus with the thorned cross, right?
But who's the lion? I don't know my my fundamentalist
Is that just like a comp? It almost looks like Aslan
Well,
from the Lion
let's
of
go-
the Wardrobe.
We will be able to get more
The
information.
Lion of Judah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll get more information when we go to the wide shot.
That tracks. Are there lions in Israel and Palestine?
No, I don't think so.
Not with climate change.
Okay.
Kurt Olson gave a magnificent presentation today about the Fincham Kerry Lake situation. Walk us through. We know you're the machine guy. My question was why nobody found this, but more importantly, what do you guys intend to do with this? We got a couple minutes here. What do you intend to do with this?
Well, we can, by the way, everybody go to lindellplan.com. You can find out everything we're doing and help out. what we're doing, first of all, I'm gonna be doing a massive promotion of that the case is there.
Pause it. I just also wanted to say, don't take him down. I want to say, like, kudos for not offering a coupon code at that break. He could have, like, there was a lot, like, he good for him.
He's biting his tongue. I mean, help us out. I mean, we know what that means. Get your wallet out.
Perhaps you spoke too soon.
Yeah, maybe we'll get it.
See the evidence and see what's out there with these machines and with the decryption codes, everything that was inside it, or decryption keys. You got the Supreme Court. Now, will they accept it or not? We don't know. I know you asked Kurt, what are the odds? Well, we're in an anomaly in history, everybody. These Supreme Court justices, their fathers, their mothers, their grandchildren, they have grandchildren, they have neighbors. They're there to protect our country. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. We will take everything back to
Hang on. Have you? I realize you're gonna go back to Arizona. Have you called the Fox guys and shared this information with Fox management? Have you called the Murdochs and say, "Hey, I found the solution. You can go get your money back"?
Oh, I will be doing that, Steve. That's number one on my list. I'm going to be doing that this week. We're doing the big push. All the media outlets, including Newsmax, by the way. I'll be reaching out to Chris Ruddy because we've got to get the word out about this. And Steve, you asked earlier in the week.
Pause it for a second. I just want to be clear. Steve Bannon said, "Hey, with all this new information you have, did you contact Fox?" And so that they could get all the money back from that lawsuit that they lost?
I think they'd be interested in that, honestly.
Oh, that's on my list. I'm definitely going to do that. No, that's actually what's the first thing I'm going to do. I had to come on here, and then I'm going to make the phone calls to save them hundreds of millions of dollars because I figured they'll probably be excited about it.
Get on Bannon, plug the URL, then go to the Murdochs and Newsmax to help with the exculpatory defense.
I already called them. I mean, I'm going to call them. I'm going to call them, and I just need to. Part of the problem is I didn't have a stamp, so I couldn't mail them the information that I had because I didn't have a stamp. It's very difficult to buy stamps now because everybody does things digitally, but of course I'm not going to send it digitally because they're watching my computer. And computers, you can't trust computers. So yes, the short answer is yes. It's just I got to find a stamp, and it's like right on number one on my list. Get a stamp. And also envelope. Like I got because I don't want to fold it. It's a lot. It's thick paper. I could put it in a manila envelope. Steve. I could do it that way, but I don't have any manila envelopes. So, and then I've got to figure out what the postage is. So, but the short answer is yes. Go ahead.
About what if the Supreme Court turns it down? Is there a thing you can do in Arizona? Absolutely, we're going to be taking it back to Arizona. We can do a whole new case, actually, with this evidence for the 2024 election to completely do an injunction against these devices and these voting machines. Also, we're going to be using this information in every case in the country, including all the lawfare lawsuits that they've got against MyPillow and everybody else out there that don't deserve these attacks by these companies. So this is the most explosive, shocking evidence that's come out.
So people are pushing forward. Talk to us. We got 2 minutes. Talk to us about deals. People want to know about what's in it for them right now. Talk to us about deals.
Well, for all your support, everybody, MyPillow is go to mypillow.com/war or just go to the War Room Square. But we're having the biggest sale we've ever had. It's a $25 extravagant
there we go.
War Room special. This is exclusive because we're giving you free shipping on your whole order here at the War Room. And if you go there, use promo code War Room. And if you go to the website, all these square, each one, you have the MyPillow 2. There we go.
Can I just pause it for a second there?
This is just amazing. Like,
so they have slide sandals there. I worked at Old Navy for a year in college, and I'll say they sold flip-flops there, and they sold them for a lot less than $25.
No. Okay, so
yeah, I have those factoring in the code.
Those Adidas sliders, I have those. I recently got a new pair for my trip, my beach vacation, and those are the same thing, and they're Adidas branded, and they were, I think, $18.
Yeah, but these
and it was originally It was originally $100.
If you are paying $100 to Mike Lindell for slide sandals, good
no,
gracious.
You guys don't get it. These are the ones that Jesus wore.
Oh, right. I forgot.
Which color did he wear, though?
All of them. I just love how, like, I don't want to detract from the biggest news story that we have ever broken. However, slide sandals, $25. Dog beds, $25. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows.
Honestly, this is the nicest thing.
$25.
Like, this is the most human Bannon has been doing, like, an obvious favor for somebody who was down on their luck like this.
Oh, if you don't think he has a piece of this. If you don't think he has a piece of this, I'm sorry. You don't think he has a piece of this?
Yeah.
You think that Bannon's not wetting his beak on this? Come on. Come on, Matt.
I like the idea of multi-use My Pillows. What's the second use for a pillow?
I also love the transition where Bannon's like, all right, no more of that. Let's get to the deals. What's the promo code, Mike?
People want the deals. Yeah. That's what they're here for. Let's hear more. I want to hear more.
Pillows, $25. The towel sets 6 packs, $25. All the new kitchen towels came in, $25. Sandals and slides. This is a pre-sale. They're already in, but this is the spring here. $25. They're normally like $79. Those rolling.
Scroll up. They're not normally $79. They were either $99 or $4. They were $99.
Oh, they split the difference.
$79, $49, whatever. Who cares? Go ahead.
Slides. This is a pre-sale. They're already in, but this is the spring here. $25. They're normally like $79. Those roll and go anywhere pillows with American flag and that, you get 2 of them for $25. Dog beds, $25. The $25 My Pillow Premium, this is what started it all. The king size, queen size, doesn't matter. $25. Beach towels, $25. It's a $25 extravaganza. Free shipping on your entire order at the War Room and at the War Room Posse. And also, we put all these other specials at mystore.com, everybody. And then you can use that promo code War Room over there, too. The 800-873-1062. I'm back in Minnesota. Fill up them phone lines. They're all downstairs. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to talk to get the feedback on how they love the War Room Posse.
I think tomorrow morning we'll get you on the factory floor. How's that sound? Mike Lindell, mypillow.com, promo code.
This is all being drop shipped from some like.
Exactly.
This is all like.
Oh
this is all
whatever the
full on bottom of the barrel type of situation.
Well, it's
That's
like
fantastic.
It's one of those things where people like I've read, like Real Housewives will start their own clothing line, and then you realize that it's just like there's these companies that make kind of generic kind of products, right? But they do it under the shadow and allow people to purchase it wholesale and then brand themselves with it. I'm pretty sure that's the kind of like bargain basement situation that Mike Pillow has forced himself into.
Bullprog
I think he's picking out the synthetics and looking at this.
Bullprog just literally just got an ad on YouTube feed for $15 slide sandals.
Oh wow. Well, there you go.
And I just want to remind everybody, shop.majorityreportradio.com. Right now, you can head over there, get some great merch.
Multi-use T-shirts, multi-use dog collars.
There's
dog collars, $25.
Multi-use hats, multi-use mugs.
4-way T-shirt. That. Did we even do? Yeah, we didn't do Laverne's thing.
Should we do it today or tomorrow?
Let's do it tomorrow. It's already. Oh, geez, I got to get going. All right. Oh God.
Wait, what? I mean,
we just wanted to do it again.
Oh, we did already. Yeah.
We did do it already. Yeah. Did we?
Yeah.
I can't remember completely. Fantastic moron. You know our empire is nearly over when Chuck Todd, the most milquetoast access journalist in the game, is bothered by the direction of MSNBC. He wouldn't ask a follow-up question to a flat earther if he was in a position of political power. Well, he's mad at NBC too, to be fair. Vermont Ben, how the hell is Bob Menendez still running for re-election? Not clear if he's going to. He's kept the door open to run as an independent.
Yeah.
I think the reason why you announced that is like you want that in your back pocket as something you can give to prosecutors.
Right.
Breaking news. It took a lot to get AOC to say this finally. Indeed. Steve Austin, Monday should be called Business Monday. Neckties should be worn, pants optional. Joanna, How is Norm Finkelstein so good on Israel, Palestine, but so bad on other things? It's widely known that he has bad positions on trans issues, but I also just saw they gave a talk about how Russia was morally justified in invading Ukraine. I mean, I don't know. I haven't
really
heard that
care.
other stuff.
Yeah. he's useful for
Internationalist,
this.
socialist. I mean, this is the thing. It's like it's one of the worst things about YouTube culture is it is like created this notion that you need to judge position. Like it becomes more about the sort of like the people who are talking, than what they're saying. But international socialists, and I'm certainly guilty of that to a certain extent. But here's the thing: like, it's one thing to have like a show where you're presenting this stuff on a daily basis. It's another to be sort of a scholar. It's I don't know. People
We've had a lot
aren't.
of guests on this show. They probably, if we look at the hundreds and hundreds of people we've had talk about things they're expert on, they probably have some clangers now and then.
Yeah, without a doubt. But it's more of a problem like with people who are like, like aggregators and do what we do. Because that's a way in which you like save time by getting your news, and you want these people to have been vetted over time with you to get a sense of like you're getting it presented in the right way. When you're talking about a scholar and you go out and you're looking for specific things that they may not be experts in, it just doesn't have the same implications in my mind. Sam, I have somewhere that if you stop breathing, you become very cold and it's viscose. I don't know what that means. 5 more. Wisconsin disco. You can tell when Sam's really in an interview because the lead up to and the questions are as long as the answers. So I'm not sure if that's 100% true. I'm not saying I don't do that, but I'm just not sure your analysis is always correct. Union Jack. Can't agree with... we did that already. Of all the IMs. Tater Tot. Up in Minnesota, billionaire Carthy Cargill was secretly buying up properties around Duluth. When residents asked reasonable questions about what her plan was, she canceled those plans, saying that she was annoyed by those who would dare question her. Strange.
I could be wrong, but Cargill, I think, might be one of the, if not the largest, one of the largest privately owned companies in the world.
Wow. Mickey 7. Tony Snow is the Fox News guy who became the Bush 43 press secretary. Correct. The Quartermenian. Why did Bannon have a British accent when he said ability? Is he transforming into a true monarchist? And I'd buy MR Slides sandals. And the final IM of the day. Dan from Columbus. The multi-use MyPillow can be used on a couch, on a recliner, in any chair, or for your car or any travel. You can also use it on top of another pillow. So apparently multi-use means you can use it anywhere as opposed to single-use pillows that burst into flames if they're not used on a bed. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,